All right. As usual, we start with our little motivation, thinking that we're going to listen to these teachings as advice. This is the reason. Buddha gives it as advice. As Tsongkhapa says, there's no contradiction between, he says, everything is to be taken as sound advice. Doesn't mean you have to take the advice because you're the boss, but it is advice. And advice for what? Well, to develop first our amazing potential. And then on the basis of that, our ability to help others. That's it. To develop the two wings of the bird, okay? So we sing our little prayer, the first two lines of which are, for those of us who do figure we're Buddhists already, who have committed ourselves. So we're reiterating our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second two lines are stating this motivation, this goal. We're going to listen to these teachings, to think of the meaning, to take as tools, to develop our qualities so we can be of benefit to others. And I'll sing it in Tibetan. We don't put up the prayer normally, Talia. You don't show it on the screen. You have it there, the refuge prayer. It's nice to do that. Can't hear you. If you haven't got it, don't worry, darling. Next time. Okay. Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. Sangye charang soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog. Sangye charang soke chognam la jangcho baru dagni kyab suchi dagi chönyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. Okay. So like we've been talking all the time, and I continually stress this because it helps us put all the teachings into a proper framework, that this presentation of the teachings, and particularly the way the Tibetans show it, and particularly our tradition called the Gelugpa's, Tsongkhapa's approach, he calls it the Lam Rim, this kind of package of Buddhist teachings that's taught in an orderly way, orderly according to the capacity of the disciple, which is fairly reasonable. That's how we learn everything. But as I keep saying, we're not used to thinking of spiritual teachings like that, you know? So all the fundamental view that underpins all of Buddhist philosophy, metaphysics, psychology, meditation, you name it, is his view about the mind. And his essential view is that what goes on in the mind is the main source of our happiness and suffering. That's the fundamental point that drives all of Buddhist teachings and therefore all of Buddha's methodology, you know. In fact, that's expressed, and I keep saying this, and it's really powerful to see this and remember it and see the experiential implications of it. The word Buddha itself, which is the result of all this practice, in this path, this gradual path, you're going to graduate as a Buddha. And Buddha implies, the first syllable implies the total eradication from your mind of all neurotic states of mind. Buddha's found that they're not at the core of our being. And this is pretty radical. This is not the view of neuroscience. This is not the view of modern psychology. The second syllable, da, implies the development to perfection of all the positive states of mind. So Buddha makes this utter distinction between neurotic, deluded, ridiculous, I-based, fear-based states of mind that are the cause of our suffering and the cause of why we harm others, and the valid, reasonable, positive, appropriate, intelligent states of mind, virtuous states of mind that are the source of our happiness and the source of our ability to benefit others. This is it. This is the fundamental basis of all Buddhist teachings. So we can hear this, everything makes sense. The teachings make sense. If we hear this, it's very powerful, because then if that's the end result, think about the meaning here. Think about the words. Think about it. If the end result is when you're a Buddha. And of course, being a Buddha, I tell you, if you started listening to all the qualities of a Buddha, it really sounds like science fiction. But this is the fundamental essence of it. That when you've achieved this, when you've accomplished the goal, you have rid your mind of all fears, all panic, all dramas, all attachment, anger, jealousy, low self-esteem. Buddha's got a whole map of the mind. He lists 34,000 distinct neurotic states of mind, all summarized as the three poisons. These cute words we like to read when we read Buddhist psychology. So to hear this is pretty shocking. I mean, I think in the 30s, wasn't it? We did lobotomies in the 30s because we're convinced the mind is the brain. So if you cut some of the bits of the brain out, you'll stop the problems. Well, we turn people into vegetables, right? We know that didn't work. So Buddha's not talking about the brain, as we know. So that's the next point to remember. The mind we're discussing here is our consciousness, our cognitive process itself. So just hearing those words, that when you've accomplished this goal, you won't have any anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, not to mention the amazing qualities you'll have. It's kind of shocking to hear it, but because we're so used to thinking of Buddhism as religion, we go, oh, that's nice, isn't it? Oh yeah, free of all delusions. I'll achieve my nirvana. I'll be free of suffering, blah, 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 We just don't hear it. I mean, it should blow our minds that somebody is presenting a method for getting rid of neuroses. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So, okay, that's the end result. Does that not tell us, therefore, the job to be done? Which is, if you want to end up getting rid of delusions and you want to end up developing your positive qualities, surely the obvious job is to distinguish between them. And that's the job of being a Buddhist. But before we do that job, we have to do another job first, because we're out of control. We're driven by attachment. We're driven by anger. We're driven by jealousy and depression and anxiety. Yes, we're also driven by love and compassion. Thank goodness they're our saving grace. But because they're so intense, and Buddha's been telling us, this is the one other component we have to factor in as a hypothesis, that our mind comes from before. Our own mind comes from its own self from before, not from mummy or daddy or God. And then we come programmed into this life with these tendencies. So if that's true, then they're very powerful. They drive us. And so the very first job, the very first level of practice, the immediate starting point, is to control the servants of those neurotic states of mind. And what's that? Your speech and your body, babies. Control your behavior. Do what your grandma said. Be a nice person. Don't harm others. So this is the very first level of practice. The very first level. Of course, the crucial reason for the Buddha, as opposed to Jesus or your grandma or somebody else, the reason that Buddha exhorts us to control the servants of our delusions, that is to say, to stop killing, stealing, jumping on the wrong partner, lying, etc., etc. These are the heaviest level of actions, ones that harm others. The reason he exhorts us at the very first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1 practice, is because everything we think and do and say produces the person we become. That's the law of karma. So here, the essence of all the first stages of practice is where you learn all about Buddhist psychology, this amazing map of your mind, and how everything you think and do and say programs your mind and produces the person you become. That's the philosophy of karma, and that's the model of the mind. This is the nuts and bolts of what we call the wisdom wing, all the work you do on yourself. First, you control your body and speech. Then, having harnessed to some degree your body and speech, you can now start to really do the job of isolating, distinguishing between the neurotic states of mind, in particular beginning to identify attachment and aversion, which are the source of all the other dramas. So at this level, you're learning to control your body and speech, and you're learning to control your mind. And who is the beneficiary of this? You are the direct beneficiary. This is the point of this level of practice. You are the direct beneficiary. You are the direct beneficiary. So all the rats and cockroaches will also be happy, as Lama Zopa says, they will have a party because you leave them in peace. But the purpose behind, the motivation behind, the reason behind this kind of practice is for your own benefit. This is one of the hardest points for us in the modern world. We just don't, this is one of karma. We don't get it, it's very hard for us to get it. But if we have what this view brings, because Buddha's telling us, like His Holiness says, karma is like self-creation. We create ourselves. The big surprise to us. But that's essentially what Buddha's saying. It's not complicated. We know you produce the musician that you become. You can thank your teacher and thank Bach and thank Mr. Steinway for making a good piano, but you do the hard work. You are the one who produces the musician. Think of it. So, but we do not think we are the person who produces the person, the love and the compassion and the kindness and the crazy person or the happy person. We have a whole bunch of weird, wacko other ideas. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. Well, I am being sarcastic, but get my point. We factor in mummy and daddy and the genes and the DNA and the chemicals and the behavior and the events and the this and the that, everything in the universe except our own mind. As Lama Zopa says, the vast majority of all humans on the planet have no idea that what goes on in their mind has any role at all in the person they become. This, I'm not trying to be sarcastic here. People often criticize me for using these terms that we use in modern psychology, but Lama Yeshe would often use it. That view that you don't realize that what goes on in your mind plays any role in who you become is schizophrenic, is demented, is mental illness. That's like thinking that you think that you can think what you like when it comes to musical theory. I can think about anything. I can decide anything I like, and then I'll still become a good musician. No, you won't. You've got to think like Bach thinks. You've got to, if you want to play like Bach, you've got to think exactly like Bach. You've got to program your mind with Bach's music. That we're not confused by that. That makes sense to us. If you want to do math, you don't say, I can think what I like. I can think 1 + 1 is 17. Well, of course you can, but it's not right and you'll go mad. You'll never get the result. But we think we can think what we like, and we don't even think that what we think plays a role. This is really that is mental illness. That is mental illness. But that's how we are. This is very shocking. And that's Buddha's, his whole point. His one point is essential that drives everything in Buddhism, all Buddhist metaphysics, all Buddhist view of the universe, all Buddhist view of karma, all Buddhist psychology, all Buddhist philosophy, is that what goes on in your mind is the source of your happiness and suffering, the main source. That's it. So the first stage is on that, the basis of that philosophy, you play safe. You keep away from the trouble, you keep away from the problems, you keep away from the alcohol, you keep away from the boys if you can't stop jumping on them, you keep away from the cake if you can't stop stuffing it in your mouth, because you're trying to control your attachment by controlling the servants of your attachment. That's the beginning of your practice, discipline, ethics, and you are the beneficiary. The next level, you start to get to your mind now, and you really start to deal with the problem itself. And you particularly start to identify attachment. And then you identify attachment. These attachment and aversion, these two, we swing between these 1,000 times a day. These words are so cute in our world, but for the Buddha, these are primordial, primordially deep. And they're the source of all the other dramas. So we have to learn to know what is attachment and what is aversion, and how to distinguish them from love, compassion, and all the other good ones. That's your job, being your own therapist. You're delving deep into your own mind. It's an intense job. That's the wisdom wing. So if you want to finish the job there, you'd realize emptiness, and then you achieve your own nirvana, and you're out of here, baby. You're done. But we're on the Mahayana path. So the main thing we'll accomplish here is what's called renunciation. And what are you renouncing? You're renouncing suffering, your suffering, not someone else's, your suffering, and its causes, your past karma and your delusions. And you learn this in the Four Noble Truths. This is the nuts and bolts of being a Buddhist, and you're the beneficiary. So now we get to the compassion wing, and we're so under control, the logic goes, that your body, speech, and mind, we can now start emphasizing helping others. We continue the job of lessening delusions, but it's in reference to benefiting others. In the wisdom wing, we're controlling our body, speech, and mind in reference to stopping our own suffering. Here, it's in reference to how to break down the barriers between self and other. So then we go through all the practices of accomplishing bodhicitta. And we should be discussing this now. This is because it's within the more advanced levels of the bodhisattva path, which is where the 8 worldly dharmas are taught. So let's look into the compassion wing now, because the 8 worldly dharmas, as I said, are just a more subtle, a more detailed presentation of a more pervasive way that attachment functions. We learn deeply about attachment in the second stages, the middle scope of the Lam Rim, the second part of our practice. But the main emphasis there is to calm attachment down in relation to the objects of attachment, like cakes and bodies and things and sense objects. But as we get more sophisticated in our practice and more knowledgeable about our mind, and we now start the job of actually continuing to break these down, but now the main emphasis in the bodhisattva path is the emphasis on, they talk about attachment, but there's a function of attachment, which is the main problem that's described in the bodhisattva path, is called self-cherishing. So in the first stages of practice, the main problem is attachment. Attachment, this bottomless pit of emotional hunger to get what the supposed I wants. And we're trying to steady this, calm it down, calm down the servants and calm down the delusions. And you become this disciplined, content, fulfilled, joyful, whole person. Not like some person walking around with a big hole in the other kind of hole. W-H-O-L-E. You become a whole person, not a person who feels like they've got a hole inside them. H-O-L-E, which is how we feel because we all are bottomless pit junkies of attachment. We feel like we're empty all the time. So in the first stages of practice, we're trying to kind of fill up that hole, not by getting things, but by filling ourselves up, by becoming content, by lessening attachment. It's hard to hear the method. It's so simple, but we can't hear it. In this first stages of practice, we feel like a junkie. We feel empty. We feel bereft. We feel separate, lonely, cut off, like there's a big gaping hole in here. So that's where the first level of our practice is to stop believing that, and this is already intense, and start filling ourselves up. And what's the method? It's almost too simple, we can't hear it. By giving up attachment. By giving up attachment. It's extremely hard to hear this. So we've got to start not believing in this primordial assumption that I'm not enough. This is the first level of practice. We become blissful, become content, more stable, more joyful, more fulfilled. This is literally the consequences of practicing the wisdom wing. You're the beneficiary. So now we continue to work on our mind. That never ceases. But now the emphasis changes from trying to control our body, speech, and mind in order to stop suffering ourselves to controlling our body, speech, and mind in order to benefit others. The bodhisattva wing. So here, the main problem isn't called attachment. The main problem is called self-cherishing. So that's really quite specific. What that is another word. What we call it in our ordinary English language is selfishness. We don't say self-cherishing. That's a very Buddhist term. I don't know whether it's Indian or Tibetan or whatever. Self-cherishing. And why is that the main enemy? You see, in the first stages of practice, the wisdom wing, the first and second scopes of the Lam Rim, we're trying to get rid of attachment, which means we're trying to stop, the emotional hunger and give up the anger and give up the jealousy and give up the depression, which is all coming from working on attachment. That's the main enemy. Here, you could argue, because of attachment, we cherish self most. We put self first. Now, this is very hard to hear because we are happy to confess to attachment. We say, oh, I'm so attached to chocolate cake, and we kind of have compassion for each other if we hear that. The poor person's a junkie. But as soon as this person says you're selfish, we get very offended. Very upset. We don't like being called selfish. But this is the point. Attachment is what attachment causes is a totally self-centered person. It's hard to hear this because we hear it as judgment. We hear it as a bitter criticism, But what Buddha's trying to tell us is that this is why we suffer. You forget about yourself, but think of anybody you know who's attached to something. Strongly hungry for something. Of course you can't think of anything else. Of course you can't think of anybody else. That's why if you're attached to beautiful, handsome boys, think about this. This is the complaint that all girls always have about boys, isn't it? Usually the old-fashioned days when boys look at you and you think they like you because they smile at you and they ask you out for dinner and they pay for your dinner, but all they want to do is get in your pants, and you're so disappointed and upset because you thought, oh, he looked like he liked me. But when you're attached to certain shapes and colors, hear my point, when you're attached to food, if you're attached to boys, attached to girls, or whatever it might be, it looks benign. You don't beat the girl up. Well, some people do, and they rape them. That's different. That's anger as well. But that classic one of I thought they liked me, we said. But I thought they liked me. No, they didn't like you. They just were attached to you. So when you're attached to somebody, it looks nice. You be nice to the person, So it's so tricky. We can't distinguish the difference because attachment blinds you and makes you get what you want. You do it gently. And if gentleness doesn't work, then you rape. Hear my point. And we put all the responsibility on the object, you know. It's very fascinating. So we conflate love and attachment. This is what's so difficult, you know. So it makes, what I'm getting at here, the main point I'm getting at, it makes you self-centered. Naturally, if you're really a junkie for food, you will do everything you can, especially with you around other people, to manipulate them to take you to get the meal or get the food. You'll do anything to get the food because we're attached. So then as soon as you're thinking single-pointedly about getting the food, you can't think of anything else. If you're single-pointedly thinking about getting heroin or alcohol, that's when we can really see it, because that attachment is so intense that of course you're self-centered. It's obvious. Think about it. It's completely logical. So the emphasis in the first wing is to have compassion for yourself and realize how it causes you harm. Now on the compassion wing, we're seeing it differently. We're seeing now the disadvantages of attachment is that it causes me to be self-centered, not to put others first. So what we're trying to do on the compassion wing is make that paradigm shift. Finally, when we've got bodhicitta, is to put others, to cherish others first. This is really intense, you know. I mean, compassion is a really advanced practice. It's very powerful. So the eight worldly dharmas is taught in this final stages of the more advanced level of practice to get bodhicitta, to really use logic to smash self-cherishing and to smash ego grasping, to smash attachment. And that's where the whole practice of transforming problems into happiness. So this is a more advanced level of working with attachment. And you're not ready, as Pabonka Rinpoche says, you've got to be a suitable vessel for that level of practice, which means you've got to have done the wisdom wing first. You can't leap into transforming problems into happiness if you don't understand what attachment is, because what a problem is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And if you don't know what that means from having done junior school and high school, you are not ready for this level of practice. You're just not ready. It's very simple. We have to know where we're at, what we're capable of, you know. So this is an outrageous level. So the logic on the compassion wing of wanting to see bad situations as good, which is smashing the eight worldly dharmas, is that you are so earnest in your wish to have incredible compassion for sentient beings. You can't bear the suffering of sentient beings. And the simple logic is that it's your ego grasping and your attachment and your self-cherishing that are holding you back from being able to benefit sentient beings. So clearly the quickest practice to smash delusions is to give your delusions exactly what they don't want, which is a person being mean to you, which is an enemy, which is called a problem. Bodhisattvas would rather have a problem. They would rather be punched in the nose than kissed. They'd rather give something than receive it. They're the opposite to normal. So that would sound mentally ill if we didn't understand the logic of it. And this is in the Bodhisattva path. It's a much more radical level. But you have to understand the logic of it, you know, and be ready to do it. This means, this is where now understanding emptiness is a hugely important part of your practice. Because the logic of transforming problems into happiness is based on the logic that nothing has an intrinsic nature of being this or that. We discussed this last week, you know. So let's look at that. Look how everything is empty, how nothing has an intrinsic nature. We did it last week, we'll do more now. But also realizing, you know, so at the beginning stages, we're playing safe and you're backing right away from the object of attachment because you don't want to energize your attachment because you've got no control. You leave the cake on the plate. At the next level, you start to look at the attachment itself and to see how it's a liar, how it misconceives the cake, how it exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. No, use a person, much better. So the first level of practice, you've got lots of anger, but you can't control your anger. So you keep out of the way of that person. You leave that boyfriend if you fight all the time. Because you know that it's dangerous for you, because you can't control your anger. So at least you try to control your body and speech. And at that level, it's like the same as an alcoholic. At this level, the first level of practice, you know perfectly well that nobody in their right mind would expect an alcoholic to give up attachment to alcohol while continuing to drink alcohol. We all know that's insanity. So if you, but we don't think it when it comes to anger, for example, or jealousy or attachment to boys, because we conflate it with love. So we can see our mind is going crazy. We can see that this guy makes us crazy. Yes, it's my anger, but I'm not ready to control it. I can't do that yet. So I scream and yell and shout. So if I'm being intelligent, just like removing myself from the alcohol, I should remove myself from that boy. But we don't, I mean, I joke and say there'd be too many women on the planet if we did that, because 40% of all women who get murdered, you know who murders them, don't you? The bloke in the same bed, pretty much. So we'd have too many women if women were intelligent enough to leave the boy before he killed her, or you kill yourself, one or the other, because of attachment. So you leave the object there because you can't control your anger, so you control your body and speech, and you remove yourself from the object. Then you get to the next level and you start to look into the anger and the attachment itself. You're still playing, you're still being cautious, there's no question. Now you get to the bodhisattva path and you become more courageous. And you get to the more advanced levels of the bodhisattva path. And now you become really courageous. Now you get to the point where you don't move yourself from the object. In fact, you would rather be with a person who is mean to you. Why? And you've got to see the simple point, because that's triggering your anger. And you want to work on your anger, and you want your anger to go. So every time someone energizes your anger and you're controlling it, you just purified your anger. So the more quickly you purify your anger, the more quickly you can get compassion, so you can benefit sentient beings. So as Geshe Sopa said, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They not just keep away from them, they actually would rather be around enemies. You've got to understand the logic of this. It sounds mentally ill to us. This is the whole area where you hear about the 8 worldly Dharmas. Because when we understand attachment, how it's a junkie only, so this is the 8 we talked about. It's a junkie for good feelings. This is the most pervasive. This is the most pervasive for good feelings. We've got to have good feelings. So if that is a basis, that's our main motivation. So whatever we meet that doesn't give us a good feeling, which then arises aversion, we have to change it, don't we? We're thirsty, we have to pick up and have a drink. We can't even wait. We have to have it now, you know? Well, I'm needing something, so I have a drink. You're uncomfortable, so you move your leg. You're bored, so you stand up and go over there. You're tired, so you go to sleep. Every second of the day, we're adjusting our behavior, our body and speech, our behavior, our body, based on attachment, wanting good feelings. We have no discipline. We can't wait for anything. We have to have it now. That's 8 worldly dharmas. In other words, attachment is always there, default, wishing to have good feelings. And the millisecond the discomfort arises, we move the body. The millisecond we got slightly thirsty, we have a drink. The millisecond we get a bit uncomfortable, we move our head. The millisecond the radio is too loud, we turn it down low. The millisecond is slightly too hot, we put the AC on. The millisecond is too cold, we put the heater on. Every second of the day, if we counted the events, there'd be probably thousands of events throughout the day when we're constantly adjusting our behavior, our body and speech, in order to continue good feelings. We cannot cope with an unhappy feeling. We can't cope with an unhappy feeling. And that's what an unhappy feeling comes when attachment doesn't get what it wants. You scratch yourself, you know, when you get itchy. You move your body. Constantly moving our body 1,000 times a second, you know. We have no discipline. We can't cope with unhappy feelings. And we're talking baby, tiny, infinitesimal, unpleasant feelings, like a child, you know. We understand this. We're all the same. This is natural. We think it's natural. Oh, that's natural. That's normal. Oh, that's intelligent. No, it's following attachment. That's the most pervasive level. So, of course, when the really bad feelings come, when you have a violent headache, or the boy's screaming at you, or the pain is unbearable in your knee, then of course we go completely crazy. Why? Because attachment isn't getting what it wants, which is pleasant feelings. So then what arises is extremely unpleasant feelings. And then what arises on the basis of that is aversion, anger. This is just normal. This is normal life. This is Buddha's analysis. We discussed it last week. That's Buddha's analysis. So to hear, so when we think, you mean I shouldn't be upset if I have a knee ache? Because we discussed last week. But it's natural to be angry if someone harms you. But it's natural to be angry if you have a headache. It's natural to have to move if you have a pain in your knee. No one's saying you have to sit there purposely and break your knee because you don't want to move. But it's just recognizing how uncontrolled our mind is, recognizing how we're junkies every millisecond to have pleasant feelings, and we adjust our behavior to continue those pleasant feelings. And if we can't do that, then we get distressed, extremely distressed. And we assume it is natural to be distressed, natural to be angry, natural to have aversion, natural to be frustrated. We don't ever question it. But that's what the analysis is in the 8 worldly dharmas. And that's what we're trying to do, is question and look at the analysis and then try to change. And why should we change? Because you want to give up attachment and aversion. If every time you give into attachment what it wants, how can you give up attachment? You're just increasing it. If every time you buy into aversion story, then you're increasing aversion. This is the whole point. And this is just a more radical level. In the first stage, you play safe. You keep away from the object. Here, we're adjusting our mind. We're changing our mind. We're learning to, the moment we see ourselves getting irritated, we catch it like that. And we change our attitude towards the object. If you can, I know, I mean, when for example, the protocol when you're sitting in teachings, for example, when I was first, you go to teachings and the Lama would be there, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. You see it among the Tibetans. They display incredible discipline out of respect. They would not move their legs. They would sit, they would not move their, I remember one time, Lama Zopa is renowned for teaching for 4 or 5 or 6 hours. Most Tibetans don't even see that. They're shocked. They can't believe we can put up with it. It's unbelievable. Most Lamas will teach for 2 hours and you have a break. Lama Zopa would go on and on and on, And so I remember one course I did, a retreat. And there's a Tibetan. Lama Zopa invited this Tibetan monk who was a ritual master in that particular retreat to come from India. And you could see he was super disciplined. They've got very good discipline with their body, completely disciplined. They stay cross-legged. They don't move. They stay there because it's respectful, it's respectful. As for drinking during teachings or eating or wriggling or sticking their legs out, that for them would be like being like a 2-year-old. They would never do it. It was one of the worst crimes. You would never do it. Never. You would never do it, So this monk, I remember this monk sitting near the throne where Rinpoche was. And because Rinpoche is teaching and teaching, now you could see his face. He never moved his body, but it was incredibly shocking for him. He'd never had to sit for 6 hours, I don't think, it's my own suggestion. It was so shocking for him, but he was so disciplined. He sat there out of respect. Now, we can't conceive of that. We just think that's being fundamentalist in the West. We think I'm allowed to do what I like. If I want to move, I'll move. If I want to stand up, I'll stand up. If I want to go out, I'll go out. Yeah, we have the right to do whatever we want. Of course, we're in charge, but we have no sense of this benefit in disciplining our mind, because it's our mind that we're disciplining, not following attachment. We can't sit for more than 5 minutes without being irritated and moving our legs and scratching ourselves and getting our drink, because we're just following our attachment every second. We don't think of it like that. We just think it's my right. I'm allowed to do that, It's very interesting to think about it. I mean, I really admire when I see the Tibetans, their incredible discipline out of respect for the teacher, right? For the teachings. It's very fascinating. But we normally just follow our attachment every second. And because in our world, in our culture, we're so technologically brilliant that we can create the most marvelous things. We can create best AC, best this, best food, best everything. So we're always raising the bar to get what attachment wants. And it's considered normal in our culture to get the very best thing. We always get the very best. This is a funny story. I'll tell you a funny story. I remember I lived in Hong Kong for a while, and where I worked with one of my friends there, Peter, there was no AC and it was stinking hot in Hong Kong. So I had my day off. I'd always go to one of the big hotels. And always loved researching all the big hotels. It's all these fancy 5-star hotels. And I love hotels because they're like everybody can walk in. They're public places. You can walk in, you can have tea, you can have dinner, you can have these gorgeous lobbies. They're divine places. I love them. So I knew every single major hotel in the 5-star hotel in Hong Kong. I knew all the best tea. So I was drinking tea at the time. And I used to buy the newspapers. What was this before iPads? I love reading all the newspapers. That was my day off. Go to one of the 5-star hotels, go to the gorgeous lobby, have some music, you know, the nice piano playing, order a pot of tea, order a cake, and then read the Independent or read the New York Times or something like that. You know, that was my day off. So I loved all the top hotels, and I always had this wish to see the best. I didn't care if I owned it. I didn't worry about that. So one time in Singapore, a few years later, I'd been to all the hotels. I'd gone, whatever, I was just there for a couple of days. And then I had this yearning to go find the best tea service in Hong Kong. I know it sounds silly. The best tea service in Singapore. It was also like researching or something, you know. So I remember I said to this taxi driver, and I was a nun, and he could see I was a nun. And suddenly I felt embarrassed to say, please send me to the best hotel. So I said, oh, I'm doing it. I lied. And I said, I'm doing it for a friend. Because I was just ashamed of going to a fancy hotel for tea, you know. So he sent me to the best hotel, but then he said, oh, that is so good. You're doing it for a friend. Always the best for a friend and the next best for yourself. I was so mortified, you know. Anyway, it was a crummy tea service. It doesn't matter. But it was very funny because we always automatically in our culture, I mean, in Tibetans have a shrine room for the Dalai Lama. They know he's never going to come. They have the best cups, the best teapots for the Lama. But we have the best teapot for ourselves, you know. I mean, this is just the view. We're like that. It's very interesting to think about this. Anyway, this is fundamental attachment to getting good feelings is something that's so normal, so natural, and something we would never in our culture, never, ever question. I mean, maybe when we're little children, we might have had a mummy and daddy who taught us discipline, but even the way we are, I mean, I'm not trying to be fundamentalist or conservative or strange here. But think about how now everything is so casual. You know, you put your feet up in front of the television, you eat your McDonald's out of a paper packet. Whereas when I was a kid, we used to sit at the dining room table and be polite to auntie and grandpa. I mean, there's something fundamental about good manners, you know, but these days, I don't know, just don't hear me in a wrong way. There's the discipline of behaving nicely when you're with other people. Broadly, that's really the point here. But we have such, and in a way, it's a wonderful quality. I mean, if you look at the extreme of some cultures where you behave perfectly in front of everybody, and then it's all, you know, then you'd be so shocking if you didn't. I remember even His Holiness the Dalai Lama saying he loved being in the West because it's also casual. So there's a good side to being casual. But when we come to the personalities, the personal side, casual means doing what you like when you feel like it. I remember years and years and years ago, His Holy Lama Yeshe in 1982, he organized a whole 6 months of amazing teachings in India and Nepal for his students. Hundreds of us went. He called it a Dharma celebration. And I remember Lama Yeshe invited His Holiness to teach a particular text. And they offered the main His Holiness's temple, the inside of it, for the Western students, like 700 of us, 500. But I remember it was, and all the Tibetans sat on the outside, if you've been to Dharamsala, you know, where normally all the Geshes stay, the Rinpoches, all the monks are inside, and then the other people sit around the veranda. Well, the Geshes and everybody were around on the veranda, and all we Westerners were in the middle. Well, it was really very shameful because most Westerners, all the hippies, you know, a bunch of hippies in the 1980s, early 80s, they'd put their legs out, they'd stand up during the teachings, they'd all be hugging each other and sort of lying down. I mean, this behavior, maybe it's just, again, conservative culture and modern culture. It was just beyond shocking behavior, you know, in front of people in this culture. It was just very shocking because we are so arrogant and ignorant. We just don't even realize that good behavior is an offering to another person. But what I'm getting at is underneath it is following attachment, following your feelings. I feel like lying down, I'm going to lie down. I feel like putting my legs up, I'm going to put my legs up. Don't hear me in a conservative fundamentalist way. It's following attachment every second, every second. There's almost, in other words, we can be so self-centered that we have no sense that we're around other people. And so we don't behave in relation to how it would be useful for other people. That's that one I always quote, Grace Kelly, that amazing actor. She said, of course I have to look beautiful. People have to look at me. That's behavior. Behavior, if you've got a bodhisattva mind, behavior is you recognize when you're with other people, you're there for their benefit. So you do what's most appropriate for them, not just to follow your own feelings. But that's how we are. It's very fascinating. And that's the attachment to having good feelings. We just think it's our right. If I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to move. If I want to pick my nose, I know certain things we might not do. We'd be embarrassed to pick our nose in public, you know. But it's just underneath it is this constant attachment hunger, neediness to feel good. And the body is the most powerful one. So then that's, in the end, I mean, we can see that, you know, it's very powerful, constantly wanting good feelings. And the second an ungood feeling comes, we have to rectify it. So of course we be reasonable, but we're unconscious is the main point. We're unconscious, we don't notice. That's the first pair of the 8 worldly dharmas. This is the most primordial, because we all we want, wherever we are, whenever we are, morning, noon, and night, we need good feelings. It's so primordial, so fundamental, this one, you know. Pervades everything we do. All the time it's there. And that's why we go up and down like a yo-yo 1,000 times a day. The boyfriend looks the wrong way at us, freak out. The weather's slightly cold, freak out. The weather's slightly hot, freak out. The noise is too loud, freak out. Can't stand the freeway, the noise is too difficult, freak out. People toot you on the freeway, you freak out. We can't cope with anything that attachment doesn't want. This is, we hear it, but we just go, oh, it's normal. Yeah, it's normal, Buddha says, but it's mental illness. And this is why you suffer, because you have no control over your mind. So the reason it's here at this level in terms of developing bodhicitta is because we're seeing that this is what's hard to hear now. The first stage is what's driving you to behave nicely is because you're sick of suffering. But here at this level, what's driving you to rip out attachment and the delusions is because you have such compassion for sentient beings. And what is preventing your compassion from growing limitlessly is your attachment. So that's the reason you want to smash your attachment. Of course, this is more advanced. Don't even pretend you're there yet, but we can hear it and hear the logic of it and attempt to practice it, you know. So then, as we said before, again, go over the 8. The next 2 or a different order. We're always wanting things, constantly craving to get things, and then constantly craving to be free of not getting things, distressed if we're not getting things. That depends on the person, the situation, you know. The next 2 are much more internal, craving to hear nice words with our name in them. Craving nice words with our name in them. It's called being praised. And then panicking when we hear words that have our name in them that are criticism. We go mad. We all know this one. And the last 2, or the order depends, seems to be the most primordial, is craving in general to have people think nicely of you. Not even hear the words, just have a good reputation. We don't think of this one, but this is the most primordial. There's a constant voice in our mind that's always thinking, I'm not enough, that I'm not enough. Not haven't got enough, yes, but the most primordial is I'm not enough. That's the most primordial. I'm not enough. So always needing affirmation from someone out there to feed back to us that I'm okay. This is the one this is the most primordial, I'd say. And we all have all of these to one degree or another. This is Buddha's analysis. Attachment is this hole inside, this bottomless pit of I'm not enough, I don't have enough, always wanting something more. That's what dissatisfaction is. We think it's just a normal state of mind. Oh, she's so dissatisfied. But we just joke about it like it's not a big deal, you know. We have no analysis for it. This is Buddha's analysis. And his bigger analysis is that we come into this life programmed, totally programmed with this dissatisfaction from practicing it in past lives. So we come into this life completely addicted already, addicted to feeling I'm not enough, from constantly, because the point, when we understand the analysis of attachment, the point is that when you're studying in the middle scope, in high school, that attachment is actually a bottomless pit, that technically getting the cake, getting the praise, getting the nice feeling, getting the right sound, getting the right, you know, reputation. That's the object of attachment. But we believe that when attachment gets it, oh, that just filled up the gaping hole. In fact, it doesn't fill it up. It temporarily does trigger a moment of good feeling, but the good feeling doesn't last because we're not satisfied with those words of praise. We want to hear the words of praise again. We're not satisfied with that one mouthful of cake. We need another mouthful of cake, because the tragedy of attachment is when it gets the object, for a moment, there's some pleasure, but then dissatisfaction kicks in and we need it again. And every time you get it, as my mother used to say, the more you get, the more you want. The more you get, the more you want. This is the profound analysis. Our mothers knew it. We know it, but Buddha's got the analysis of it. So getting the person to love you, getting the person to give you something, getting the nice sound, moving your legs so you get a pleasant feeling. It is a temporary respite from the unpleasant feeling. That's all. But it doesn't bring happiness or satisfaction. It does for a minute, but then you're not satisfied again and you've got to do it again. This is the bottomless pit that attachment causes. It is a nightmare. It never ends. So we practice this for eons. So we come into this life, depending on how most recent the attachment is, and we are born already with, at the conception, we've already got dissatisfaction. We come out of the womb and we've got dissatisfaction. So depending on how deep the dissatisfaction is how much we suffer. So we have to listen carefully to this, hear it, taste it, see it logically. So the first reason to give up attachment is you control the body and speech because you're sick of suffering in the first two levels. And then you give up you control the servants, and then you control the attachment. And then in the compassion wing, you're continuing to do that job, but now it's in reference to wanting to break down the barriers that delusions have created between self and other. So you continue to want to work on your mind, but at this more radical level now, because you want to get closer to sentient beings so you can help them, so you can break down the delusion, so you can get more compassion. And that's where the wisdom one kicks in. So powerful. Because then you start to look, then you start to realize that instead of, if you're cold on a hot day and you can't get the heater on, instead of just fretting, instead of getting upset, getting irritated, getting annoyed, you literally observe your mind getting irritated. It's too hot, we'll think. So right there is the opportunity to practice. That's it. So simple. Right, that second. Well, what's hot? It's just the way I label it. It is the way I label it. I've been so used to labeling it like this. And I believe it, but I can change the label. I can start to see some good things about this. That's exactly applying emptiness. And sometimes we have no choice. If you can change it, fine, do so. But why not practice, That's proving emptiness. I mean, for example, you use a simple example. When I go into a steam bath, when I go into what do you call it, the other one, the dry heat, what's it called? A sauna. I want to sweat as much as possible. I want to be as hot as possible. I want to last as long as I can in that steam room. I test myself. I want to be dripping in sweat. I want to be as hot as Hades. I'm loving the heat, isn't it? So it proves. When I did Kung Fu, and we would fight, we'd do sparring, I didn't mind being punched. I didn't mind being, I didn't mind. In fact, we were taught by our Mr. Lee, our Kung Fu teacher in London, when I did it in the 80s in London, that if we were sparring and you hit me, I would apologize to you because I didn't get out of the way in time. So I didn't mind being punched. I didn't mind sweating, getting exhausted, doing 30 push-ups on my knuckles. It was incredible discomfort. I'd come home exhausted, but happy with my discomfort. And I'd lie in a bath of arnica, and have a relaxing bath. So, which shows that being punched is not in its nature negative. It shows that being hot in its nature is not negative. It's how you label it. It shows it. If you're trying to be the best cyclist on the planet, you will push yourself to the limit, to levels that most people would collapse under, and you are proud of yourself by not giving in. You make such effort to push your body when you go to the gym. I mean, these obvious examples where enormous discomfort, but you joyfully rejoice in it because you know there's a benefit to it, because you're going to get fit and muscles, you know. So it's clear we can call a difficult situation good. It's just a question of seeing the advantage of it, you know. You see the advantage of it. Being tired, one of the commonest ones is, as soon as we are tired, we assume I have to be stressed. We don't see that we can change our mind about being tired. And as again, we prove it when you're in love with somebody. When you're in love with somebody, you go out, you're dancing all night, you go to the jazz club all night, you're sitting there up talking to them all night, full of energy and enthusiasm, and you go to work next day exhausted, but you're blissfully happy. It proves that being tired is not the cause of suffering. It proves that being punched is not the cause of suffering. It proves that, you know, being hot is not the cause of suffering. It proves people go up and go into and swim in the icy water on a freezing cold day. I mean, there's obvious examples staring us in our face that we can change the way we label something. But when we don't want to, we don't want it. We set it in stone. No, the boyfriend hit me. He or even forget hitting. Most boyfriends don't hit. Maybe here they don't. You know, the boyfriend was mean to me. Didn't look at me perfectly first. We have a panic attack, and then we believe 1,000,000,000% our analysis, you know. So seeing things, one time His Holiness was asked, what's a way to apply emptiness in daily life? It's so simple, it's embarrassing, and I've just proved we can do it. You simply see something from another point of view. That's applying dependent arising, that things exist according to how you see it. That's the real dependent arising. That's exactly why my friends in prison, in these garbage dumps, on death row, some of them wrongly accused, because they've worked on their minds, they've changed their interpretation, they are happy. This is logic. It's just hard to hear, that's all. So it's up to us, you know. It's up to us. So the reason you want to do this at this level of practice is because you've got such compassion for sentient beings, and your goal is to want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible, which means to rip out delusions. That's why that's why those 8 verses. Did we go through the 8 verses, Talia? I forget. Did we go through those 8 verses or not?
Yes, we did.
We did go through.
Yes.
When did we do it? When did we do it? Remember how long ago?
Last week we also spoke about the last 2 pairs, which
we did. No, what about the 8 verses? What about the eight verses of mind training? That text by Langri Tang. Did we go through that?
No, we didn't do the 8 verses. No.
Okay, well, let's go through the 8 verses then. Okay, let's go through the 8 verses. I've got just in my head. Let's just go through them naturally. I don't forget the text. Don't worry. I'll just talk about them casually. And I'll explain each one. I might need the text at some point, Talia. But let's just listen to these ones. This is, you know, this obviously, these verses, this is from this whole area of practice in the Bodhisattva path. But I've got to also talk about compassion. I told you I'd do that, and I will do that. So the point is this. Sorry, sniffing away. Okay, the 8 verses. Langri Tangpa is the author, some Tibetan. He was a student of Dromtompa, who was a student of Atisha. And Atisha was the one who I think brought these teachings. He got them from his guru Selingpa in Sumatra, in Indonesia. He traveled from India to Indonesia, and I think he spent many years there with his guru. So, you know, that's where in the Borobudur, all those places in Indonesia, Vajrayana used to be flourishing there. You know, this is back at the time of Atisha, 11th century, 10th century. So he then went to Tibet eventually, and then he was the one who brought these lineages, I think, of all these amazing teachings on bodhicitta, and particularly the teachings on transforming problems into happiness, which is specifically within this teachings that are expressed in these 8 verses, called the teachings of mind transformation, called Lojong. It's a term, mind transformation, all of Buddhism, that, but in particular, this area in the Bodhisattva path, where you learn to see bad things as good, and that you want the bad things in order to smash delusions, in order to quickly get more realizations. So these 8 verses, I mean, analyze them carefully. I always go on about them. I get very shocked when I read them because they're so outrageous. But because they're poetry, we read them, go, oh, yes, I'm going to be, you know, holy and love my enemies, blah, 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 you know, forget it. Let's just look at them. The first verse is already outrageous. The first verse is already too much, and it will get worse. So the first verse says, And we have to take the view that Langri Tangpa, who wrote these verses, we have to take the view that he's not just pretending. We have to take the view that this is his view, that he is at that level. Think about this meaning. It's a real person writing real experiential text, you know, real experiential feelings. So it's kind of pretty intense. So the first verse says, in order, and already this first lines need explaining, in order to get the benefit from all sentient beings. We tend to have an impulse to think, oh, that means in order to get the benefit, in order to make the most of, for all sentient beings. It's very specific. No, it says from, to get the benefit from all sentient beings. So what that means is this. It's just the way they talk. We've got to understand it. So listen. If Talia wants to become the best doctor on the planet, and what's driving her, think like this, is a good analogy. A doctor means Buddha, okay? So she wants to become the best doctor. So what's driving her is incredible compassion. Think about this, for sentient beings suffering. That's the crucial piece. Not just earn a salary and put a sign up on the doctor's thing and give a few band-aids every day and then close the door, you know, and count her money. No, she's driven, let's say driven, this is the bodhisattva, driven by compassion for sentient beings. So is aiming to become the best doctor. Why? Because when you're the best doctor, you can heal everybody. It's pretty obvious. You're limited until you're the best doctor. So if you want to become the best doctor as quickly as possible, because you've got such compassion, you're not going to sit there and dispense a few band-aids every day. That won't get you far, will it? She will want to go and join the Doctors Sans Frontières, what do you go from? Doctors Without Borders, Sans Frontières, isn't it? She wants to go to the worst scenarios, the war zones. She won't just go to the easy places. She'll go to the worst. Think about this, it's logical. She'll go to the worst scenarios where she'll be tested to the limit, or the worst cases, so she can improve her skills to be the best doctor as quickly as possible. This really is logical, driven by compassion. So that's the bodhisattva. So think about this. If she never met any suffering person, how could she ever become a good doctor? If she never met sick people, she'd be useless. Her hands would be tied. So for bodhisattvas, they want the worst suffering people. They're not going to stay up in the mountains. That's the first and second scope. They're going to come down to the worst scenarios, the worst garbage cities where the psychopaths and the crazies live, because that's grist for their mill. So those really harmed, really terrible suffering people in the war zone are grist for her mill. That's the bodhisattva attitude. And so she's going to take as much benefit as she can from all these suffering people, so that she can become the best doctor, because then she can be able to benefit everybody. That's the meaning. So you need, in other words, she needs suffering people. She got to meet suffering people. Bodhisattvas have to meet suffering people. And the more suffering, the better. And that's exactly what's expressed in these 8 verses. Exactly that. They're the extreme cases. So as Geshe Sopa said, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They need the worst scenarios. So to get the benefit from all this crazy suffering, it tests them to the limit, which smashes their self-cherishing and quickly helps them achieve incredible bodhicitta. That's the idea, to make them as much benefit from all sentient beings. The next 2 lines say, who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Now, what the hell does that mean? First of all, what's a wish-fulfilling jewel? No such thing exists, but they talk about it from eons ago. There would be a jewel at some point that whatever you wanted, you'd get something for it. Well, I'd think it's much better to say who are more precious than $1 million. Good enough. $1 million will do. That's enough, you know. So think what the hell that means. What do you mean all suffering, all sentient beings, all, think of the words, are more precious than $1 million to me? You've got to analyze what that means. Don't just say it with a nice holy voice. Oh, sentient beings are so precious. What the hell do they mean? Because for Talia, those suffering patients, because she's aiming totally to become the best doctor, driven totally by unbelievable compassion, they are the most precious thing to her. They're more precious than, what good is $1 million to her to help her become the best doctor? It won't help. So that's the meaning. But to think of it, to be at that level, to have that level of compassion, sounds pretty intense. So all we can do is read these verses and aspire to be like this, you know. Don't just gloss over those words and make them sound holy. They're pretty intense. who are more, so it says, in order to take the benefit from all sentient beings, so I'm more precious than $1 million. I will see them all. I will love them and take care of them all the time. Something like that, you know. I mean, excuse me, we maybe take care of our poodle. We might love our boyfriend. All sentient beings? It's too much. Think of the meaning. Outrageous. The next verse says, and I always joke and say, hang on. That if you were a therapist and you advise this to your client, they could sue you. You hear what I'm going to say. You hear the next verse. When I am with others, I will see myself as the lowest of all, and I will see them as supreme. So let's analyze this, please. I mean, please, let's analyze this carefully. This is where these instructions from the Lojong teachings were kept secret. They were kept secret. Because Milarepa said, whatever's Dharma, the world is opposite. Or whatever the world is, Dharma's opposite. This is the extreme opposite, you know. Talk about being a suitable vessel. So what does this mean? Because we love to see ourselves as having low self-esteem. It's one of our favorite we admit to it easily because we feel sorry for ourselves. But when it's very scary, I don't know if we discussed this last week, but actually low self-esteem, which is an overinflated sense of your ugliness, is the flip side of arrogance, which is an overinflated sense of your importance. So all delusions are distorted. All delusions have this aspect of exaggerating. So if you've got arrogance, and we would never like to admit to having arrogance, I tell you, or pride, never. We don't like that. But think about this. If you didn't have pride, which is an overinflated sense of your importance, of being more handsome, being more intelligent. It doesn't have to be the whole of you is more important, but certain aspects of you are more important. I'm more intelligent. I'm more beautiful. I've got the best muscles. Whatever your style is, I'm the best at IT. I'm the best musician. Whatever it is, there's an overinflated identification with being better, you know? So the thing is, all delusions are very fragile because they're rooted in a fantasy I. So if an arrogant person meets a person who is even better, more beautiful, better muscles, they will be devastated, and that pride will collapse and will turn into low self-esteem. Oh, I'm the worst. I'm pathetic. I'm a disaster. I failed. That's very interesting to think this, and we don't like to think of it like that. But if we didn't have pride, we would not have low self-esteem. So think of low self-esteem. It's like angry with those people out there. How dare they be better than me? It's like angry. It's very interesting. Low self-esteem. So then we hear qualities like self-confidence, or we hear qualities like humility. They are virtues. This is where the distinction Buddha makes between delusions and virtues. They're virtues, and any virtuous state of mind is comfortable, is relaxed, is easygoing, is not self-centered. All delusions are necessarily I-based and freaked out and fear-based and anxious and worried and very despairing. So arrogance is really uncomfortable. We know how horrible arrogance is. If you see a sportsman who's like the best, but also they're arrogant. But you see another sportsman who's also the best, but they're not arrogant. The difference is huge. And this is because delusions and virtues. So this is the irony, seeming to us the irony. If we are content in ourselves, that means we also rejoice in our qualities. That means we've got self-confidence, and we're very humble, and we're very unassuming, and we're delighted to meet somebody else who's better than us because we can learn from them. We're not threatened by it. And if you are self-confident, you would have humility. Look at His Holiness. I think it's an amazing example, you know. It's so evident. He's powerful, charismatic. He's incredible how powerful he is as a person, his personality, you know. But he's really humble and really unassuming. But he's bossy and loud, and he's outrageous. But he's so humble and loves every person who's with him. It's so clear to everybody. But when we hear humble, we hear low self-esteem. We hear a person's humble or they're all kind of small. It's so, so wrong, I tell you. I always quote this years and years ago, before I was a Buddhist. I remember on the television seeing an interview with two famous people. One was Margot Fonteyn, that English ballet dancer. When I was a kid, I was into ballet and I was in love with all the ballet dancers. I'd read all about them. And Dame Margot Fonteyn, I remember seeing her in Melbourne when I was about 11 or something. Dame Margot, this famous ballet dancer, English ballet dancer. I mean, she was like the top of the top of the top. But when you could hear, and she was renowned, because she had qualities, she had problems like everybody, but she was very humble and unassuming. And the other person that was interviewed was a famous cricketer, you know, cricket for Australians and the English and the Indians. And his name was Don Bradman. He was like in the 1930s. He was famous. So they were being interviewed, and it was evident they're the top in their field. You couldn't get more top, but they were so unassuming, so humble and natural, easygoing, you know, praising other people. They weren't arrogant, but they weren't low self-esteem. So when you've got arrogance, you've got low self-esteem. And when you've got humility, you've got self-confidence. And this is, again, these words are simple, but the difference here, when you see it in the framework of the Buddhist view of distinguishing between the delusions and the virtues, psychologically, this is quite profound, because all the neuroses are I-based, fear-based, anger, attachment, low self-esteem, arrogance, pride, all the variations, attachment to everything is I-based, is self-centered, and is painful. Don't hear it as blame. We've got to feel the pain of these states of mind to ourselves, and then of course the harm they do to others. But the virtues are easygoing. So Dalai Lama, he's the best possible. He's the best scholar, the best, he's seen as the best of everything, but he's just unassuming, delightful, humble, funny, joyful, kind. Because virtues are not I-based. They're not neurotic I-based. They're interdependent. There's a connection, there's a sense of connectedness when you've got the virtues prevailing. And that's what makes you more happy, and that what makes you more useful to others. So this view in Buddhism, the distinction between delusions and virtues, which sounds kind of cute or something, is really quite profound psychologically, if we can hear it. And that's the basis for our ability to work on our minds. You know, it's huge, just huge. So, seeing yourself as the lowest of all, it is obvious that if you're still at the victim level, which is before you even entered the path, and you're completely overwhelmed by your own misery, overwhelmed by self-loathing, overwhelmed by thinking you're a creep, got a bully boyfriend whom you're beaten and bashed and bullied around because you've got low self-esteem and self-loathing and attachment and anger and jealousy, that's a normal person. This practice, honey, is not for you. This is insane to think that's your practice. You're not capable, not possible. It's not possible. It's demented. You've got to start having some self-respect and get the hell out of this ridiculous boyfriend. Tell him to go away, you know. There's nowhere near possible to this one. So the only person who can be with a group of people and genuinely feel that others are more marvelous, more delightful, more gorgeous, more wonderful than them is a person who's got self-confidence, a person who's got no arrogance, a person who's got no low self-esteem, a person who's got no attachment, a person who's got no anger or less of it. That's the kind of attitude we have to cultivate. This is a huge attitude, but you can't possibly do this if you're still fractured and broken in yourself. You can try and practice it. It's a good practice. And maybe try once a day. But to say all sentient beings, I will see myself as the lowest of all, it's too extreme. And that's the irony. Someone like His Holiness would actually feel that, but it's not seen in the way we see it. And that's why you cannot understand these words if we don't understand this distinction in Buddhist psychology, the distinction between the delusions, which are I-based and neurotic, and the virtues, which aren't I-based and aren't neurotic. It's a very distinct thing in Buddhist psychology, you know. So not only see yourself as the lowest of all, but to see others as supreme. Because bodhisattvas are exactly like that. They just adore everybody. And this is completely, this is smashing this self-cherishing, smashing this sense of a separate self, smashing this view, which comes with ego, that somehow I'm more important. We don't think we're more important. But when you've got low self-esteem, like I said, I'm sorry, if you analyze it, you are angry. How dare these people be better than me? Why do you get this? Think about this. Why do we get distressed if people are better than us? Why do we feel I'm nobody? It's because they're somebody and we're furious with them. Whereas humility delights in somebody else being better. Oh, tell me how you do it. I'd love to learn, because you're feeling confident. We have to analyze these things, it's very intense. The next verse says something like, this one seems to not fit for me. I don't know why it comes in here. It's peculiar, but never mind, because they're all about, all these verses are about how you relate to others, but this one seems to be just yourself. And it says something like, when you notice a delusion arising in your mind, which will harm you and others, that instant you avert it and you change it, something like that. So that, in other words, that's already advanced. Just think, I mean, for us, the default mode is non-virtue. The default mode is the delusions, and every now and again a virtue will pop up. We should delight in it. But this other way, it's assuming you're so practiced and got concentration that you're catching your mind every second. And the moment a little moment of attachment comes, the moment a bit of anger comes, the moment a bit of low self-esteem comes, you grab it and avert it. I mean, that's daily practice. That's high school practice, every second. But here, again, the main emphasis is because it harms others. What's happening? Elena, she's looking like she's doing something. What's going on? Getting distracted?
I checked my translation app to look up a word.
Oh, okay. Which word? I'll tell you.
Avert.
Avert, push it away.
Okay.
It's comes from aversion, which is basic anger.
Okay.
Avert it.
Thank you.
All right, darling. So anyway, that's that next verse. Now the next three each keeps getting worse. And this is my sense. The next one is sort of like the world out there. And it says something like, when you meet or when you hear about a person who is evil and doing very, very evil and doing very many negative things and full of suffering, evil and full of suffering. Well, you know what's the word we use in our culture? A psychopath. It's a lovely term. I don't know where the evolution of that word is. Greek again. We love all our Greek words. But when we say psychopath, we get it. We get a really deluded person, a really harmful person, a really psychotic person, at whatever level. Very broad term, isn't it? Well, that's what they mean there. But can you imagine him being in 10th century, 11th century Tibet? Try and think of this. 11th century Tibet. You might have heard of one naughty person maybe 50 years ago in the 14 suburbs down the road, 52 villages away, or in Lhasa, they might have heard one person. But look at our world now. You have to just hear about. We live with them. They're next door. Maniacs, crazy people, politicians who lie and steal and rape and kill and drop bombs. This world is full of psychopaths, if we think of that term, of people who are very evil and causing and are suffering terribly in themselves. Look at the universe now. So we are surrounded by that level of suffering. It is normal for us. And it says there, a rare person, if you meet a rare, who are so rare, it is not rare for us. So this is an incredible opportunity. So what are you going to do? What's your relationship to those people? You're going to act as if you found a precious treasure. We're drowning in treasures, if that's the case. So why is it a treasure? Because, again, the bottom line in all of these verses, the bottom line at this level of practice is that you're trying to have such compassion. And what blocks your compassion is your delusions. So when we meet a beautiful person, it's easy to have compassion. You've got your own child. It is easy to have masses of compassion. But if there's your little child playing with a smelly kid next door, you don't have any, you don't want to know about compassion for that person. But this is the attitude here. They're rare, even though they're not rare, they're the most precious for you, that you've found like a precious treasure. Why? Because when you meet a crazy person, you are forced to open your heart. You are forced to see that incredible suffering. So you are forced to go beyond your limit of usual compassion and have incredible compassion. Because this is the whole essence of these verses, is seeing bad things as good, because they're smashing your delusions. It's a simple example. I always think of, people who are achieving incredible goals, like in sport. I always think of Lance Armstrong. I know he's a naughty man now, but I remember reading an interview with him. The level of his fanaticism to push himself to the limit, the highest mountain, more high than anybody else, that was a treasure for him. That's exactly the same here. The most mad people out there are like the peak. for you. It forces you to push yourself to the limit, smashing your delusions, you know. That's the attitude in these verses. So of course it's radical. The next one, it seems to be, it's now getting closer to home. It seems to be, this would like be at work, among your broader community. When you've been basically it's when you've been criticized and when you've been blamed essentially for something you didn't do wrong. Essentially it's that. You will happily take the blame and offer the victory to them. Now, this is insane too. It's completely demented. This is one of the major reasons we suffer in our lives, where we're wrongly criticized. People think we did something bad. People accuse us of lying. This is the commonest thing. Everybody in this Zoom room has had something like this in our life. And this is the most painful suffering. We know that. At work, you're criticized. You've been demoted. You've been fired. The boss thinks this. Your colleagues think you did that. I mean, it's all about reputation. It's nightmarish. The suffering is unbearable. So this is, again, completely opposite to normal, to actually take the blame, accept the blame, and offer the victory to them. This is too much for our minds. And in normal daily life, you'd be considered mentally ill if you do that. You'd be considered a victim. You'd be considered completely a mentally ill person if you considered to do this. But we're talking here about a high-level practice to smash your ego grasping, to smash your self-cherishing. It's a perfect practice if you want to smash self-cherishing. If you don't want to smash self-cherishing, then don't do it. That's the point. And we can see in simple situations, even your child, a little 3-year-old accuses you, "Mummy, you did that." You know you don't have a panic attack and want to sue your child. "Oh, darling, I know I did, didn't I? Wasn't I naughty?" Well, do like that. I always use this one story. It's a wonderful story. Always I have this story. I love this story. I should find more stories, because if you've heard it before, I'm boring you. Excuse me. So this story is years and years and years ago in Sydney. A friend of mine, George, was at a party, or a bunch of Buddhists. And the fellow whose party it was, I think his name was John, he had his brand new BMW, and he was talking about how the next door neighbor, he found his car one day was scratched right along the door. So he bought a new door, had it fixed. It happened again. And then it happened again or something. And he realized it was the fellow next door, this old guy. And he had no idea what he thought this old guy thought he'd done, but he was scratching his door. So he said to his friends, "What'll I do?" You know, well, some said, scratch his door. Some said, sue him. And then George said, "I know what Lama Zopa would do." Lama Zopa would then find out this old guy about what he liked. And he would then buy him a beautiful gift, and he would apologize. I mean, he'd done nothing wrong, right? Because an added component here is this. This is a very important one. We've discussed this. Remember we talked last week, I think, about karma, how it works. There's 4 tracks of karma. And the track that's called experiences similar to the cause, which is basically this kind of situation where you're seen and treated in a certain way by others, including all the good ones. So people love you and tell you the truth and believe your words and treat you nicely and give you things. That's the fruit of your incredible generosity and virtue and truth-telling and morality in a past life. So it comes back to you, But then the same with the bad stuff. It's the rubbish coming back from past lives, not now. Mostly not now. So we can deduce then from this experience, this fellow John had done nothing wrong, but this old guy next door thought he had. And this is often because of past karma. That's why we get accused, because people think we did something, but that's from past karma they think it. This is the whole point. When you understand this, it's quite powerful. At least you understand why they think this. Even the opposite. And as a little girl, I lied purposely one time. I gave an answer at school and I lied. And then people believed me. And I remember thinking at that time, I'd better be careful of my words if people believe me, even when I'm lying. Well, that was the fruit for me of past truth-telling in past lives, where even when I lied now, people believe me. So anyway, in this experience, we're talking about John. This other fellow, the old fellow, was convinced John had done something wrong. So he's scratching his BMW, for God's sake. So then John thought this was a great idea, Lama Zopa's idea. So he found out this old fellow liked golf. So he bought him these very fancy golf balls and wrapped them beautifully and went to the front door or back door and knocked on the door, and the old, and he offered to the old guy, and he said he apologized for anything he'd done wrong. He offered him this gift, So anyway, John was in the kitchen having a cup of tea, happy he'd solved the problem. He felt good about it. And the old guy came in, grinning from ear to ear, so happy with his gift unwrapped. And the old guy said to John, he said, "This is the nicest thing anybody has done." He said, "Everything is forgiven. I mean, whatever happened doesn't matter." So John took the blame and he offered the victory to this old guy. Now, in that case, it worked. Look at the result, Now, look at the courage you need to do that. I mean, I've read about some neighbors. There's one, I remember reading in one of those magazines about these two rich people, like billionaires, neighbors. And it all began a fight which has lasted for 25 years, and lawyers and hundreds of millions of dollars in lawyers and evil and like war between them. It all began with some trash can slightly too over to the wrong side of the neighbor's land, So that grew from there, never giving in, blaming, more, suing. You hear so many stories like this. But just take the blame. It's such a profound practice, because when you look at how we feel when we're just merely accused, forget about having your fancy new BMW scratched, just being accused of something you didn't do, even minor. And this is what we have. This is what practice is. We have to look at the pain it causes. And this is why we have to do the analysis of what is attachment. And it's because we have attachment, because we are addicted to only being praised and only being seen as a good person. Our attachment is so frantic, we can't survive unless people tell us we're a lovely person. This shows how demented we are, that we don't even know we're a lovely person already. We have to have someone tell us we're a lovely person. Think about that. That's the suffering of attachment. The Buddha's saying we are everything already inside ourselves. It's demented to think that you need someone else to tell you you're a nice person for you to be a nice person. But that's shown if someone tells you you're not a nice person, if someone accuses you. This is the source of like insanity of many people on this planet, because we have attachment and aversion. So it's a powerful practice if you can. So of course you use your intelligence. If it's not the right situation, you do something else, but it's being conscious. And if we can do that, it's like putting atomic bombs under your delusions. It's a method for lessening your delusions. It's not just you being a humble person and someone smashing you when you say, please keep hitting me. You're purifying your mind. This is the proactive energy that's happening. By having that, you're purifying attachment. You're purifying anger, which is increasing your compassion, which is moving you closer to your goal of Buddhahood. Every time Talia stretches herself to the limit by helping another really suffering patient, she's not just being a nice person, she's increasing her ability to become a doctor. This is the real thing that's happening here. You're increasing your Buddhahood. You're getting closer to Buddhahood. The next verse is the worst. It's like that. This seems to me right at home, like your beloved husband. You've devoted your life to this person, or your beloved child. And it says something like a person whom you've sacrificed, I forget the words, given your life for, whom you've had so much hope for, whom you've given your life for, basically. They turn against you. You will treat them as if they were your guru. This is the closest one. The number of parents who come to me, or mothers especially, who are broken-hearted because their children have rejected them. They weren't psychopaths. They were just regular people with attachment and aversion. But, we know what it's like. Children blame their parents, and our psychology says that they are the ones who made it. So, of course, we blame them. The number of people who drop their parents in old people's homes, leave them for dead, never speak to their parents again. I mean, it's just beyond heartbreaking. I can't even imagine, even if you're not a very good parent. That's that one. I'll see them as my guru, These verses are intense, okay? So even to read them with sincerity and to make the aspiration to become like this, to be strong, so you can smash your delusions, so you can open your heart to every sentient being, because they're all suffering as well. That's the basis. That's the framework for these verses, And the next two, the next one, the seventh, this is where Tonglen comes in. And Tonglen, excuse me, Tonglen is the culmination of all these, is that practice where you really do the job of wanting to take upon yourself the suffering of others and to give them your happiness. This is where you put your money where your mouth is. This is where all these practices culminate. And so we know it's taught as like this formal practice, you know, where you can use your breath. And for some reason in the West, I don't know, people love Tonglen. I mean, you hear all these other verses and they're shocked by it, but Tonglen is the result of all this, but people love Tonglen. I don't know why it is. It's very fascinating to me. It's just very fascinating because this is the most outrageous of all. So Tonglen means giving and taking. Giving, taking. So there's a way of doing it formally. People spend years and years in retreat doing this, using all the beings of all the realms of existence. So essentially, the simple way to start, you visualize a person in front of you, and you start with a beloved. You start with your child who's got a headache. That's easy. So what you do when you're using your breath, you visualize breathing in, breathing off them, the pain, into yourself like yucky smoke, and breathing it in. And you imagine like you're self-cherishing, like this little rock at your heart or something. You be creative. And you're breathing in their suffering, thinking, I would rather have it than them. If I could, I would rather have it than them. So the goal of this meditation is not to heal their headache. It's not a healing technique. There are lots of healing techniques. It's got nothing to do with healing them. It's got nothing to do with actually getting their headache away from them. It's you using them to do this meditation, to develop the courageous attitude that if you could take it away from them and give it to yourself, you'd rather do that. In other words, you'd rather have the suffering than them. So it's a practice for you. It's not a healing technique. And of course, the obvious thing is you're not trying to get a headache. That's absurd, you know. Breathing it in, I'm getting a headache, I'm getting a headache. That's ridiculous. It's utterly nonsense to think the result is to get a headache. No, it's an attitude of smashing self-cherishing, where you're developing the attitude. First of all, compassion, okay? Compassion is, oh my God, look at that headache. This is terrible. The next level of compassion, and I haven't mentioned this, and I've got to talk more about the Bodhisattva teachings, which I will. Half an hour left. Okay. So compassion is, you see suffering and you go, oh my God, look at that suffering. You wish they didn't have it. That's compassion. But there's a next level of compassion that's unique to the Bodhisattva path, which is the framework we're discussing here. And that is, not only do you see that suffering, oh my God, look at the suffering, but you say, what can I do to take it away? This is called great compassion. And sometimes in the text, they make it another level. Lama Zopa calls it the special attitude. It's like this. Not only, oh my God, look at the suffering, but what can I do to take it away? That's the action energy. And that's the unique characteristic of the Bodhisattva path. If you know, that's the unique characteristic of the brave attitude, they say, of a Bodhisattva who says it's my job. It's like their job description. When you've got great compassion, that's moving off to bodhicitta, because you're seeing that you are responsible. If I don't do it, who will? It's like the compassion of a mother, you know. She knows it's her job. Her kid could be drowning. She'd have such compassion, but she's not sitting on the beach wondering who's going to save her child. Even if she can't swim, she's in the water. She knows it's her job. That's bodhisattvas. So that's an attitude to cultivate. Is very courageous. It's optimistic attitude. What can I do? You know. So great, that's great compassion. Well, Tonglen is like cream on the top. Not only are you saying, oh my God, look at that headache, that's terrible. Not only are you saying, what can I do to help? But you're saying, you know what? I would rather have it. So it's not, again, not a healing technique. You're not trying to heal the headache. It's you're using this visualization, and people do it in years of retreat using all the hell realm beings, all the animals, all the spirits, each one individually, training their mind to visualize the suffering coming off that person like yucky smoke into you and smashing your self-cherishing. So it makes you very courageous. And of course, in the end, what does it do? It doesn't just make you feel good. what you're doing is training your mind to have this outrageous attitude that you'd rather have the suffering than them. Mothers have it. You see children, people talk about parents, and I mean, you hear parents say, I wish I could have that suffering, not my child. People say it. Even one of my friends in prison, I never forget Richie, years ago, this maniac, well, he's not a maniac now, you know, Mexican gangster, killed several people on the streets, in prison for life. I always remember when I first met him up in the top security prison in California, where they're in lockdown, they call permanent lockdown, in their cell 23 hours a day. Then they have 1 hour walking up and down in another cell with no windows or anything, just with their, you know, just get exercise for 1 hour. So then their small cell, 23 hours a day, few books, you know, a pen, a pad, that's about all they possess. So anyway, there he was. What am I saying? Oh yeah, so he's writing letters to me and everything, because I was on the grapevine. He met me from another prisoner. This is back in 20 years ago when I first met him, 25 years ago. So anyway, he told me in the letter how he was very violent. He was very angry, but he was very laid back, he said. But when he gets angry, he gets very angry. I think he killed a few people on the streets, whatever. He wasn't on death row. So anyway, he's this gangster. So then eventually I met him. I went up to see him. And there we were, the glass between us, and I was on the phone. And there he was, covered in his tattoos. One of the common things, the Mexican gangsters especially, I think, and maybe the black gangs too in prisons, that they're their own tattoo artists. They have all this incredible art. They learn it, you know, all over his face, tattoos on his body. So anyway, he told me about how angry he would get. So I said to him, how are you, Richie, and how's your anger? Well, he kind of blushed under his tattoos, you know, and said, well, Robina, I had a fight with my cellie. In California, you call your cellmate your cellie. I had a fight with my cellie this morning, and I put his head down the toilet. But then he stopped and he said very sincerely, but Robina, I took it out again. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. You know, I could not believe he didn't kill a fourth person, you know, that was very amazing. Then he had the guy thrown out of the cell and he sat down and did his Tara meditation. These Mexicans love to do Tara. Anyway, that's one example, but years later, because we'd write to each other, and he wrote to me and he said one time that all these young boys, these young Mexicans, I mean, many times in California, they're changing the rules now. You know, even juveniles like less than 16 will be tried as adults, you know. So all these young men, my people, he said, my people, the Mexicans coming in with life sentences. And he said something simple like this. Two things he said in the same letter. One was, he said, I wish I could just take upon it myself. I'm already in prison. I wish I could take upon them myself, their sentence, and they can get out of prison. But the other thing he said he had not HIV, but yes, maybe his liver was bad. It's sort of like HIV. I'm not quite sure. But he said, well, instead of getting, they offered him medicine. And he said, well, maybe Robina, instead of getting medicine, maybe I should have the suffering and then and seek and get and die so I can purify my negative karma. So, I mean, I thought there's this Mexican gangster, you know, wanting to take upon himself the suffering of his young Mexican friends. I've never had that thought. And then thinking he maybe should die and have suffering so he could purify his karma. I mean, I thought that's pretty incredible, you know. This is a supposed Mexican gangster whom the system says is an evil monster. So anyway, I was very moved by that. So Tonglen, this technique. So when you breathe in, you visualize that person. You wish you having the attitude of wanting them to be free of suffering. You're not having the self-conscious attitude, I'm trying to get a headache. That's meaningless. You're not even thinking of yourself. You're seeing this person. You're having compassion, and you would wish you could take upon yourself their suffering and that they could be free of it. It's profound. And then when you breathe out blissful light, and you're giving them your happiness, your merit, your good things. Now, this is done as a formal meditation, but we can do this any day you like. You can do it any day you want. You can see a homeless person. So maybe you're not ready to go over there and give them your car keys and give them your house keys and change clothing, and you sit down in that spot and they go to your house. That's really giving, you know. If you can't do that, you imagine if you could, you would. If I were brave enough, maybe I could do that. It's all to do with your mind, you know. But not in some soupy sentimental way. It's a powerful way to specifically counteract the instinct of, phew, I'm glad it's not me, you know. I'm okay. Look at them. Phew, push away. It's super powerful. And it's, if you don't have a sense of emptiness, it's not going to work, you know. This is why understanding emptiness is a powerful way to understand the logic of why we can change our interpretation of something, call a bad thing good. We've got to know where we're at. So, you know, even with the one back, I said before, the second verse where you see yourself as the lowest of all, and that's meaning everybody all the time. I mean, you're not at that level. Don't try. It's ridiculous. But why not try it sincerely every now and again with one person, especially a person you don't like? Maybe your ugly old auntie, someone at work. Be very specific and think in that person, think of one thing they can do that really is better than you. That's practicing that one perfectly. This is very powerful. Maybe they've got cuter legs. Maybe their ears are prettier. Maybe they're better at computers. Maybe they've got nicer hair. I mean, think of something really simple and humble. That is a powerful practice of that one. Powerful. So they are better than you and you are less. That's a fact. But we take that so personally. We get very injured to think I'm lower. We can't stand that thought. We can't stand the thought that someone is higher. We're very kind of unhappy with that, you know. So we've got to get to hear the meaning of it. Okay, listen, I've been talking nonstop for an hour and 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. I don't ask any questions. Please forgive me. Time for questions. Questions now. Talia?
Yes, there's a question
Please ask me.
from Ariane. Would you like to ask a question yourself? Would you like me to say it?
Oh, okay.
Talk to me, darling.
My question is, how is having self-respect viewed in the practice for taking the blame for something you didn't do, or is it or having healthy boundaries? Is that a component, or is that more of a Western thought?
Okay, let's analyze. Okay, good, Ariane. Let's analyze what we mean by healthy boundaries. I think if we talk about that, my sense is in terms of these levels of practice, that's right at the beginning when we're still in the mode of having lots of attachment and neediness and being a victim. That's the first thing we have to do. In other words, if I'm in a relationship with that boyfriend who's abusing me, that means I'm a victim, I'm hopeless, I've got lots of attachment, I'm needy, I'm yearning them for them to love me, they keep abusing me. That's my practice to become a reasonable person. I've got to put some decent boundaries up. I've got to start realizing I've got to stop being a victim, but I've got to own the fact that I'm being a victim. Mm-hmm. And that's already difficult for us in our culture. That sounds because that sounds like you're blaming the victim. We're talking here in the Buddhist view, there are abusive people out there. There are people who abuse and kill and terrorize and steal. That's a given. We get that. So of course, the very beginning, we have to, as a reasonable human being, we need a proper sense of boundaries. But that we don't even have that, Ariane. Look at us. We're needy. We fall into terrible relationships. And then we run around blaming everybody. So this whole approach here is we've got to start becoming conscious. And the very first level of my practice, forget about transforming, to forget about taking the blame. I'm doing that, but in an erotic way. I'm already saying, oh, he really loves me. You know, you defend him when he abuses you. That's not intelligent. That's not taking the blame. That's mental illness. Yeah. So it's right at the beginning, I've got to start having some self-respect and realizing I've got to make some choices about my life. I've got to stop this bloody relationship. Then I can begin to start controlling my behavior. Then I can start looking at my mind. Then I can go to the compassion wing. So it's levels and levels and levels. Are you seeing my point? Okay. Do you get the point I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah.
Gradual progression, you know? So this practice is for highly advanced people, darling, or we can try our best to practice it. If we're brave enough, we can understand the logic. It's so easy to misunderstand these advices because we can only hear them in the framework of being low self-esteem already. Mm-hmm. Do you understand?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That actually helps.
That's good.
Explain a lot. Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is so important.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to read these words and really misunderstand. And they're shocking words, you know. You've got to know where they're at, where we are in relation to these instructions, you know.
Yeah. Your explanation was very helpful.
I'm so happy, so glad.
For that, yeah, thank you.
That's enough. Yeah. Good, darling. Thank you so much, Ariane. Yes, what else, Talia?
Yes, and there's a question from the center. So
good.
Please go ahead.
Who's asking me? Yes.
My name is Arseny. I just want to ask, like, how to make it practical, how to start practice Buddhism.
Control your body and control your speech. Discipline. I'm not joking. This is literally what I'm saying. This is the first level of practice. Junior school, entry level, start getting discipline, start controlling your speech. Don't badmouth everybody when you feel like it. I'm not even joking now. This is real practice. Control your servants of your attachment and the servants of your jealousy and the servants of your anger and the servants of your depression. So control the body and speech. Have some discipline. Get up every morning, do a little practice. Discipline throughout the day, control yourself, don't say too many bad words, don't jump on too many girls, don't have too many. It literally means control your body and speech. And I know it doesn't sound very comfortable to hear this is the first level of practice, but this is literally the first level. And then when you start to do that, you know, and eventually maybe you become a Buddhist. If you like Buddhism, you can take refuge, and then you take the lay person's vows, and then you start to look into your mind. You start to recognize there's attachment and there's anger and there's jealousy. And so with all of this, you have a little daily practice every day. So you start to become more conscious. You control your body, you control your speech. Don't talk about people behind their back. Don't abuse people. Then you work at your mind. Then you go and you slowly add compassion to the mix, step by baby step. Does that make any sense at all or not?
Yeah, it just looks like very far away, and like
we're all very far away. We've got to start somewhere.
mm,
Have some confidence. We've all got the potential. We've all got potential. That's the thing that I find very encouraging from the Buddhist view of the mind, that we've all got incredible potential, and it's up to us to do it. So to have confidence it's possible is the first step.
yeah,
So, you know, keep going to the center and to keep doing the classes they have there, and slowly it all starts to make sense. But you've got to be clear that you like the Buddhist teachings. That's up to you first. You've got to decide you think this system is okay. You've got to decide that. You've got to be clear, because you're the boss.
yeah. Thank you.
Understand?
Today I had, are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I am, Zalo.
Okay. Today I had a situation a couple of hours ago in which my mother, I still live with my mother, and she asked me to go buy some stuff, you know, in the streets, like some food, but with a lot of specifications, like sugar has to be like this has to be like that, this has to be like this, and it has to be cheap, and this has to buy, you have to buy here, and you have to buy here, this, you know, like a lot of specifications.
Okay, then?
I already knew that when I came back, it would be like something, it was going to be wrong.
I understand that. I understand that. Yes. So Zalo, your mother, like everybody else, has lots of attachment and she has lots of aversion and she's never satisfied. But you know your mother, you live with her, so you know her very well.
Yes.
So what's
exactly.
So I
came back and she started like, no, this is wrong. It was too expensive, you know. So I got angry with her and we got in a little fight. It was little. So.
What's your question, Zalo?
The question is, like, what? First, I didn't take the blame. You know, I got angry.
Yes.
So
I understand.
First, what should I do now? If I should like apologize, give her the money back, or something like that. And then the next one is how to react in the next time.
Okay. So listen. So you can see this is exactly the point. Why we have to start the most basic level of practice, your most first level, junior school, first practice. You know your mother. You've lived with her since you were a tiny boy. You are very familiar with your mother. And if you're being kind and try to be objective, if you know a bit about Buddhism, you can see she's a perfect example of a very dissatisfied person. She's got lots of attachment, lots of expectations, lots of neediness, and lots of anger and annoyance when she doesn't get what she wants. Join the universe, Zalo. She's a perfect example of a normal person. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
now, she's your mum. And the fact is you're living with her. How come you're living with her? For a start, may I ask that question? I mean, you're a big boy now. How come you're living with your mother?
I'm 25 years old. I mean, I'm not that big.
Oh, I know in your culture you're not big, but maybe I mean, we leave home when we're 15 in our culture, but never mind, go on. So why are you living with your mother? Give me some reasons. I'm not being rude now, but we are discussing it. So why?
Of course. I was traveling last year and I came back right before the COVID started, the confinement,
Yes.
and I didn't have time to like think about
I
where I was.
understand. I understand. So you've lived with your mother for 6 months or something, is it? 6 months you're living with your mother?
Yeah, maybe 8 months.
8 months, okay. You have your own bedroom?
Yes, I do.
You share the kitchen with her?
Yes.
And you pay her rent?
No, there's no rent. I mean,
Okay. She doesn't, but you don't pay her rent.
no, I don't pay her.
Okay. So Zalo, I'm going to be tough with you now. You are the person taking advantage of your mother. You live with free rent. You pay for the food or she pays for the food?
Half and half. I pay a little.
So you help her clean the house?
Not so much. I mean, a little
Not
bit.
so much. So she lives with anybody else?
Yeah, I have 2 siblings living with
And
us.
they live there too?
What?
Your siblings live there too?
Yes.
You have a father?
My father lives in another house. Yes, I do have a father.
He doesn't
But
live there.
no.
So basically 3 of you are living in your mother's house.
Yes,
And
and
she does the housework.
yeah, let's say yes.
And you don't pay her any rent.
No.
Well, Zalo, excuse me, you got to fucking grow up and be a big boy and treat your mother with respect, and you bloody will shut your bloody mouth and you shop for her and you let her tell her anything she likes. You are using your mother right now, Zalo, excuse me. So you be humble and you prostrate and you do your practice every day and you look at your own attachment to get what you want and you look at your anger when you don't get what you want and you love your mother and you respect your mother and you shut your mouth. What do you think? Do you understand or not?
Yeah, no,
Do you
I
understand
totally.
where I'm coming from?
No, I totally understand. I totally
The
understand.
insult and abuse. Your mother's neurotic. I accept that. Well, so are you. So your practice is profound, Zalo, to practice humility, to be grateful to your mother, to thank her every day. But keep out of her way. Don't make yourself more difficult. If you can't control your speech, keep out of her way. But you do kind things to her. You thank her for her kindness, but don't expect her to be happy. Don't expect her to be grateful. That's her unhappy mind. If you know you know that. So you and because of you're using your mother like most boys do. Can you hear my point, Zalo?
Yeah, I totally hear you.
Do this. I mean, you're very intelligent and you've got a good heart. You can do this. But you got to practice every morning. You got to vow to yourself, I will not say one bad word to my mother. You vow every morning, Zalo. That's why the power of making a decision. And then at the end of the day, if you have any Buddhist practice, you do your purification. But you keep distant. You don't give her the money back. No. You don't feed into her rubbish, but you be kind to her because she's your mother and because she's brought you up and because you're using her right now. So you be humble and kind to her, is my suggestion. And look at your own mind.
No,
What do you think?
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to do that, say that in public, but
okay,
you asked.
okay.
We all understand. It's all relative, it's all real. If this was your girlfriend, it'd be another answer. It'd be another community, it'd be a different discussion. But it's your mum. And you're using her house. And she does the housework and takes care of you like you're her boy. When you're a fully grown man. So at least you can be kind and shut your mouth and never criticize her, never say one bad word behind her back, and you do whatever you can for her. But keep out of her way as well, just to make it not easy for yourself. And love her for who she is and have compassion. What do you think?
What if she asked me again to do this and I...
Sorry, Zalo, what? Say again. What?
If this situation happens again and I know I can...
Of course it will happen again. Of course you should do her shopping and let her be unhappy, Zalo. Let her be angry. Who do you think she's harming? Not you. She's harming herself. She's dissatisfied. She's angry. She is unhappy. And that's very typical because she's been seen as a shitty woman. Nobody respects her. She knows that. And she doesn't know how to respect herself. So at least you respect her and you thank her for her kindness. But don't expect her to be happy. Don't expect her to respond nicely. But you be very careful how you treat her. And that's your practice. Control your mouth. But seeing as you are living there, you've got to give something. So you do her shopping for her and let her be complaining. But put it this way, Zalo. If this is what I'm talking about before to Ariane, if you cannot handle this, you have no choice. You leave your mother's house. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot use that mother and have free rent and then expect her to be different. You either live with this and accept it and accept her free rent and be kind to your mother, or if you can't handle it and you think it's not best for you, you leave tomorrow and find another place to live. You cannot have it both ways. You make a decision, Zalo, what you can do. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, totally. Thank you.
Good darling. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, Wendy. Your turn, Wendy.
So now I'm interested in what you have to say to the girlfriend in that situation.
Where's the girlfriend?
Well,
What
you
girlfriend?
said this is your mother, so I'm
Oh
talking.
no, if it were the girlfriend, then it's a whole different discussion, isn't it? I mean, he's got to look at his victim mentality, using up his girlfriend and expecting her to be different, and she's dissatisfied. He's got to learn about his own mind. He's got to learn about his own mind now. But if it's his girlfriend, it will be definitely the same thing. All the more so, you either stay in this relationship and learn from it, or you leave. You can't have it both ways. But this is a big tragedy, how we all are, Wendy. You know, whether it's your mother or your job, or you're telling me how you hate your job. Your job's a disaster. The boss is so terrible. What'll I do? Well, you could, two options, Zalo, I would say to him. You could leave the job if you can't handle it. If you really can't handle it, that's what I'm saying to him. You can't have it, you can't expect the boss to be different. And then, so you either stay in the job if you feel there's something in this relationship, and Zalo could do this with his mum, if he could learn about his own mind from this, learn about his own attachment, learn about his own self-centeredness, learn about his own compassion, learning, it's a great learning experience for Zalo if he can do it. But if he can't do it, he has to go. You can't have it both ways. But we might as well be in prison. Often I say that to my friends in prison. They know they can't leave the prison. They can't change their cellmates. They can't make the prison like them. So they've got no choice but to work on their mind. So think it like you're in prison, Zalo, and this is your roommate. You've got two choices. You've got one choice, Zalo. You work on your mind and you learn to love your mother and forgive her and accept her shit. And you be more respectful to your mother. That's a powerful practice for you. But if you can't handle it, Zalo, you leave. These are the only options. This is really when it's really powerful to see. All of us is the same. It's just very hard to get to these two conclusions, though.
My question, Robina, actually is where is faith? How does faith get played out in Buddhism? Because there's no God, right? There's
of
no
course.
God. What
no, of course. Faith is a huge one. Wendy, good question. Thank you. Right now, what we're doing in this talk and all our talks, I am just literally telling you about Buddha's view of reality, aren't I? So it's a very different view from the ordinary world, for example. So let's say, so what I'm doing as a Buddhist, I came into this path. I heard the teachings. I went to this course with Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe. I took refuge. Then a year later, I decided I'd become a nun. I went to Kathmandu and I became a nun. So here I am buying into this entire view of the universe. And I like the big picture, Wendy. So I'm not just doing 1% of Buddhism. I'm trying to do the whole thing. So I like the entire view. So I can't possibly prove all this to be true yet, can I? I've got to be clairvoyant to prove that there are past lives. I've got to be clairvoyant to understand if a person's a Buddha. So it's a very big deal, but I'm not at that level yet. Just like I'm studying math and I'm only in grade 2, how can I prove that physics is right? I can't yet. So I've got to have faith in my teachers, don't I? And look at the Latin. Confidence, confide, with trust. But it's a trust that's based on your own wisdom, based on your own research. I've checked up on the Buddha. I've checked up on these teachers. I've checked up on the Dalai Lama. I've checked up on the system. And I've got some inferential certainty that they seem pretty reasonable. So I've committed myself. So I'm going one step at a time. But yes, absolutely faith, but not the blind faith that Christians and Muslims talk about, which is the only option if you have faith in the Creator, because by definition, you cannot prove that God is right, because that means you become God. And that's the most shocking sin of pride. So you have to have this blind faith. But here it's faith in my math teacher. Every time I listen to my math, I go home and I prove it to myself by doing my homework. Then I get to grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, and my faith continues. But eventually I get some, what they call inferential certainty. And then eventually you get the direct experience. That's the process, Do you understand? Mm-hmm. I mean, you have faith in a doctor. You don't just go to that doctor because he's handsome. You check on their reputation. You check on the patients. So you have some confidence, faith, trust that he's valid. Then you take the medicine and then you begin to prove it for yourself that it actually helps you. So it's a gradual experiential process, not just on a blind faith and you stay stuck in it, That's kind of idiocy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're the boss in that process, you know. You've got to kind of, and that's really, there's a lovely way they talk about in the teachings. They talk about how we all, no, never mind that. That'll do. That's enough. That's enough. That makes sense. Don't you think that? So it's up to us to use our noggins, you know. I mean, I've got to have faith in that doctor. I've got to have faith in my teachers, but I checked on them first. I checked on Lama Yoshi. I checked on Lama Zopa. I checked on the Dalai Lama. And the more I see them, the more they seem to prove to me that they're valid people. So I have more confidence when they give me the teachings. And then I take them home and I internalize to the best of my ability, one step at a time. And as the Dalai Lama said, if we're practicing Buddha's methodology, you go one step at a time, you tick the boxes as you go. It's incremental. But at a certain point, if you get more advanced and you discover that what he said really isn't true, then you must reject him, of course. That's always the assumption in Buddhism. You know, Einstein can tell us that E equals mc squared. He's proved it. But what's the point of it? We just can't believe in him. I've got to prove it myself. So it's one step at a time. And as you move through your math, you get more and more confidence that Einstein's valid as you prove it to yourself. It's an incremental process. It's just like that here.
Thank
You
you.
understand? Makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Who else? Bogdan had a question, did he?
Yes.
We're time to go
Hello.
home. Hello.
Thank you
Oh,
very much.
okay, darling.
Firstly, could you clarify the meaning of doing prostrations for me, please?
Okay, yeah. It's Tibetan tradition. You go to Taiwan, they do it differently. You go to China, they do it. You go to Thailand, they do another style. It's just first of all, it's a cultural tradition coming from India. And what a prostration is, it's a very elaborate handshake. It's a greeting, a very humble greeting. That's all it is. Paying respect.
To the Buddha.
To the Buddha, whom you're trying to become like. It's like when it's like, of course, it's cultural. It's cultural. But often because something is a different culture, we just see it as, oh, that's just a ritual and it has no meaning. But, if you met a Tibetan person who's never met a Westerner and you thrust your hand out to shake hands, they've never heard of a handshake. And they'll look at you wondering why you're poking your hand at them. But then you grab their hand and they'll hold their hand like all limp because they've never heard of a handshake. But it's our culture and we know what a handshake is because we all buy into it. We all understand the meaning, but he's never heard of it. So for him, it's just a ritual, but there's meaning in it. And everything we do with our body and speech is just ritual, but it's just different traditions. So it's a very respectful way. And often it's done as a practice. You do lots of them. Because the logic is in Buddhism, everything you do and say and think, you're purifying your mind or you're creating virtue or non-virtue. So doing prostrations in relation to the particular practice we do where we recite the different names of a particular Buddha. It's a sutra from way back. And it's in all the Buddhist culture. There's a group of particular Buddhas called the 35 Buddhas, and we say their names and we do the prostration. So the attitude is you're connecting to the Buddhas and you're putting your body onto the ground. You're saying prayers with your mouth and you're saying the name. So you're purifying your body, you're purifying your speech, and you're purifying your mind. Because everything we think and do and say leaves imprints in the mind. So it's seen as a purification practice. Does that make sense psychologically?
Certainly, yeah, it does. I was just curious because I wasn't really sure of the meaning, but I want to implement it.
Yes, good. No, and that's why. So then there's protocols. Like I said to Talia at the beginning of class, if we were all in the Gompa together, we'd all be, this is just how it is. It's Tibetan culture. But the thing is, it is just Tibetan. But I mean, many of us Westerners have chosen to buy into Tibetan style. But we've got to see the meaning of it, just not do it mindlessly. It's not how we do. I mean, when I was a Catholic, I'd go to church and I'd do a genuflection. I don't know if you're a Catholic or not, or a Christian. So there's just different traditions of doing things. And so when I became a Buddhist, I'd kind of buy into the Tibetan style because the Tibetans are my teachers, but not everything. I mean, as the Dalai Lama said, if there's no meaning to one of the rituals, you don't do it, So it's going to adjust to a Western style because now it's in the West. But I mean, still these prostrations are something we all do. And we typically start a class with prostrations. So I would do my 3 prostrations first if I'm going to be sitting to do the teaching. But if I'm a student, we'd all be standing in the Gompa ready. And then the teacher comes in, they do their prostrations, and then he'd sit down. And then we do our 3 prostrations and we'd sit down. It's just tradition, but it's got meaning. It's respect. It's just showing respect. It's like the Japanese put their hands like this, but this one you use your whole body. It's respect. It's greeting somebody. Do you understand?
And while I do it, do I have to think of something, visualize something, or?
Yes, I mean, there's different ways you can do, but the prostrations we do 3 times at the beginning of a teaching, or you do with 3 times when you sit down to do your practice. Whenever I do my practice, I do my 3 prostrations first. There's a little mantra you would say with that prostration, and and you're to visualize your. So, for example, when you have your hands above here, it creates the cause to achieve. I never know the meaning. It's very funny. This thing above the Buddha's head. Then here, I'm creating the cause to achieve the enlightened body, then the enlightened speech, then enlightened mind at my heart. And then I go down and I'm saying the mantra, and then I go up again. So there's things you think and things you say when you do it. Yes.
Is it Om Mani Padme Hum or which mantra?
Where do you live, Bogdan?
In normally I live in Germany, but I study in the Netherlands.
Where are
so
you
I
now?
live in the Netherlands right now.
Because none of the Buddhist centers are open, are they? So I mean, you've got to just learn. You got to, if you're going to be wanting to do all this, you just got to learn from somebody who knows how to do it, or look on this. Yeah, maybe you can.
I may find it on the internet.
You might, but why don't you just email me? Email me. Okay, we can talk about it.
Okay.
Email robinacortin@mac.com, like the computer.
Yep.
Email. Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Who's next? Time to go home. Look, 3 o'clock. 3 minutes past the hour. Gone so quickly. I'm so sorry. Were there any more questions? Just in case.
Robina, I think we have no more questions for tonight.
Okay. So we keep going.
Just
yeah.
Just want to say thank you on behalf of everyone here, and we continue next week, and we'll do better. We will.
We're just learning how to be all learning what to do, but you don't feel like you're forced to do these things. I mean, if you don't feel like you're a Buddhist, you don't have to do it. You don't. Please don't feel guilty. You've got to be forced to do something. You're the boss here. You're the boss. Okay.
Just a little bit chaotic when we started.
All right, Jangchub Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Guchi Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gondu Pavashok. That means may bodhicitta grow and grow in the hearts of all. Okay. So all these 2 hours have been together, as many moments as there have been, as many seeds we've planted. So maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our effort, applying what we've heard as techniques to know help out control our body, our speech, and our mind, so we can develop our amazing potential and never give up. Okay. And learn from all the answers. Zalo's was very intense, but I think we get the idea. You got something, Zalo?
Yeah, totally.
Good on you, Zalo. Good. Everybody, we're all the same. All got our own learnings and our own situations. Okay, darlings, much love. Goodbye and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.